All right. Good morning, Doug. We're back with a file Q&A, and these questions come from members of our private member community. If you'd like to join that, there's a link in the description below. So, Doug, first question. What are the positives and negatives of notoriety and fame? Is it advisable to become a public figure in today's world, even on a small scale, if you have views to the contrary to the establishment?
Yeah, well, everybody thinks that they'd like to be rich and famous, I guess. But given a choice between the two, you definitely prefer rich to famous. And that's certainly true if you have highly controversial views. I mean, look, the first time that I ever flirted with fame, a little bit of fame, I guess, was in 1980, the day before the national elections, when Reagan was elected, running against Jimmy Carter, must have been.
Yeah.
And so I was on the Donahue show for a full hour. And of course, that was the Oprah of its day. It was huge.
When there were only 3 channels of options. So it's
yeah,
even
exactly. So everybody was watching Donahue. I mean, he was gigantic. And he was a very smart guy. So we were talking about interesting things. And that YouTube is still up. If anybody wants to watch it, it's actually quite good, even though some of the best parts of it have been deleted, but that's a different story. Anyway, after I got off the show, I'm in Chicago, and I walk into a men's room, and a guy looks at me in the men's room. He says, "Wait a minute, I just saw you on television, didn't I?" And we had a brief conversation. I said, "Well, this is interesting, getting recognized by a complete stranger." Okay, that's kind of gratifying. Okay, makes you feel, important. But you got to be so careful about these things, because look at what happened to Alex Jones, who became famous for saying things that are outre and a lot of people don't like. And the result is he's been bankrupt. And a lot of people hate him. Whether they should or not, I don't know. So I know Alex, but not very well. I mean, he kind of lives in his own little bubble, even from a personal point of view, I find. So I don't know if it's important to him to be famous or not. He's mainly worried about money right now, I think.
Yeah, but it's for someone who, you got to imagine fame was an important thing to him at some point, because he was seeking fame or fortune even this whole time.
Yeah, must have been. Give you another example of somebody who was kind of famous or infamous, which a lot of people think Alex is David Duke. I was on somebody's radio show in New Orleans one time, and David Duke had a radio show too on that same channel. And so we got to know each other, and he had me on his radio show. I gave him a copy of Crisis Investing for the Rest of the 90s, which I happened to have with me because I was doing media. And so we got to know each other somewhat, got together a little bit, because I wanted to find out what kind of a guy David Duke was.
Head of the as a pariah in the media.
Huh?
Right? And the media paints him as a pariah, like a white supremacist evil guy, right?
Well, he's an interesting guy. He's very smart. Keeps himself in very good condition. Anyway, the whole thing is this. He's got almost everybody hates him, except people that are just part of his group or whatever like that. And I found that, he was intelligent. He was interesting company. He does have what I find objectionable views, but he defends them from a reasonable point of view, within that context. But would I want to be famous like David is famous? No. Chances are just too good that somebody's going to attack you or maybe want to kill you. And there's no money really in being famous that way. So I guess, how are we going to answer the question? What was the exact question?
What are the positives and the negatives of notoriety? And then is it advisable to become a public figure in today's world?
Yeah, I think it's risky, especially today, if you're a libertarian becoming a public figure. In fact, I'm asking myself, and you should ask yourself this too.
I do all the
I mean,
time.
we're saying things, even on this podcast, which are politically incorrect, that the powers that be that run anything from the World Economic Forum to the US government to much smaller entities don't like, and it antagonizes them, and then they can do bad things to you. So what's the point? I mean, good karma?
I mean, we've been asking ourselves privately and a couple times publicly
Yeah.
for the last few years since we've been doing this podcast, whether or not it makes any sense to do it at all, because what we get out of it is, I mean, we do have the private membership thing now, but that's still inconsequential. So then it went away, it wouldn't make any difference to us financially. So it's like, we don't want to be famous. So what is there isn't much upside to it in truth, except for, like you said, good karma more than anything else.
Yeah, it must be, because I hate people telling me what I can and can't do.
Yes.
That really rubs me the wrong way. So in a way, apart from the good karma, it's that if somebody doesn't say things, then what are we all, just serfs, just cattle? Well, they treat us that way, of course.
Exactly.
I guess that's the reason. That must be why we do it.
Yeah.
But it's probably not very smart.
No, it's not. It might not be the smartest thing, but I think it's important. I think it has been important. I think, but this guy's. What are some of the positives of notoriety, though? I know there's been some advantages that you have, that have kind of come your way because of you were a well-known figure within a specific niche.
Yeah. Oh, there's no question that there are advantages to that. You're presented with deals and opportunities. That's worthwhile. You meet interesting and often exotic people because they know who you are and want to get to know you. So that's good. Yeah, sure, there are advantages to becoming well-known.
Yeah. But I definitely think it's better to be well-known within a narrow niche versus, the broad celebrity status, that people get. I think that's the advantages really dissipate quickly. You can't go anywhere without being hassled. Like, that wouldn't be any fun.
Oh no, I mean, being somebody like Frank Sinatra or Elvis, or their current equivalents, that's just got to be a gigantic nuisance, a huge pain in the ass, dangerous, expensive. You need bodyguards. I mean, because people are crazy. I mean,
increasingly so. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I guess if somebody basically has the opportunity to become a public figure or become, get some fame, even within a niche today, would you recommend that is it a worthwhile pursuit at all, or is it something they should avoid?
Look, the only things that I've ever really regretted, we've talked about this before. I got plenty of regrets of things I've done, but I really regret the things that I haven't done. So if you have a chance to become famous, not in preference to being rich, I think that's much more important.
I agree.
Yeah, take it, because you can always kind of get out of the public limelight if you want later on, if it turns out you really don't like it. So yeah, do it. If you have a chance to be famous, take it.
Okay.
For a while, anyway.
Good. Clear answer. All right, Doug, in the last episode, you mentioned that you had some role in organizing Freedom Fest with Mark Skousen. Would you care to elaborate on that a little bit more of the background?
Yeah, this incidentally relates to the first question, even though I presume it's a different questioner, because back in, when was it? When was this? Lost in the mists of history. Probably in about 1980, roughly, when my second book, Crisis Investing, was #1 on the New York Times list, and I was doing all kinds of talk shows and stuff like that. I thought, you know what? This is a rare opportunity. I ought to capitalize on this fleeting fame, national fame that I had. So I decided that I wanted to put on a private conference. And I called it the Eris Society, after Eris, an obscure Greek goddess that anybody can look up, Eris. And the idea was to put a little conference together where people that should know each other, but don't, can get to know each other. And so we're talking about people that have done something, that are something, okay? So boldly, I sent out an invitation announcing this conference in 1980 in Aspen, which wasn't nearly the kind of place that it is today. It was, an interesting small town at the end of the road. And I invited people I wanted to meet. And I thought, well, maybe they've heard of me and want to meet me and so forth, the other people. And among others that I invited were Stuart Brand, who was a very big deal then, still is today, who founded the Whole Earth Catalog and a whole bunch of other things. So I invited him. And Stuart said, this sounds kind of interesting. And he invited John Brockman, who was a very powerful New York agent who founded something himself called the Reality Club, full of movie stars and authors and stuff like that in New York. And I later went to that with John. So that was good. And who else came to that thing? Oh, God. Harry Brown came to it. And he had
the Hells
interesting...
Angels guy. Hells Angels, the leader of the Hells Angels.
Yeah, that's right. Well, that was later. The first one. Was small, only 15 people or so, but it was a lot of fun because there was 15 bright, interesting people. And then later on, it became big and got out of control. And I invited everybody from Sonny Barger, who was the head of the Hells Angels, and we became personal friends later. Sonny kicked the bucket recently, to Paul McCready, who did the Gossamer Condor and the Sun Racer and stuff like that. And Burt Rutan, who's doing that thing with Richard Branson. Burt came to one, and oh, Jesus, all kinds of famous people came to it. It could have been the foundation of something like the World Economic Forum. Except the World Economic Forum, you had to be very rich and politically powerful. And these weren't people, they were people that basically I wanted to meet that were interesting and stimulating and fun to be with, okay? But if I'd organized the thing and kept it going, it could have become as ultra exclusive and God, I got to get there and so forth, but very different, obviously, than WF. But, I just took it as a, informal party, and it cost me, a bunch of money every year, which I said, yeah, that's okay. But, and then after 30 years, about 2010, roughly, I gave it up because I said, it became like everything does as time goes on, became degraded and corrupt, and people would invite their good buddy. Oh, you got to come here. This is fun. Hey, I didn't invite your good buddy, and all kinds of people started wandering. And I didn't, people would bring their spouses who didn't belong there. So I said, what the hell with this? And it was great to start with, like a lot of things are, and then dissipated. Probably because I didn't want to run it with an iron hand. That's not my style.
No, it's not.
So anyway, that's the background of the question was, how does that relate to Mark Skousen's thing?
Yeah.
Mark Skousen started coming to these things from the second or third one, and I went to every one of the Eris meetings after that. And then when he saw that I was going to wrap it up, Mark, who's a smart guy said, well, let's make this thing big and make it economic and self-sustaining and blah, blah. So that's how we started Freedom Fest. It was because, and of course, I'm, Mark and I have anyway, Mark will tell you that's exactly how it started, because it was a good idea, but he commercialized it and he's made it into a big, huge tent. And it's just another conference for all kinds of people that come there. And so I'm afraid that Freedom Fest, in many ways, has gone the way of the Era Society. It's become big and sloppy and corrupt, and that happens. It's the natural course of life with everything.
Yep.
With corporations, you name it. Anyway, that's how it started.
Okay, good. Let's see, Doug, in a past podcast, you mentioned that you'd invested in Hive blockchain technology, and Frank Holmes is the CEO of that. So he says, can you provide any details on why you took that investment, and if he knows Frank Holmes?
Well, Frank and I are very old friends. Jesus, how long have I known Frank? Like 40 years, who knows? But actually, it was another friend that got me into it, Frank Justra. And, this is one of the nice things about knowing people and staying in touch with them on good terms and being able to bring something to the party. And when they were founding the company, they said, well, all right, this is when people get the cheap stock. So I was in the room in the deal. I got 1 million shares at 2 cents a piece. Okay, I'll take a shot with 20 grand for 1 million shares of something that sounds like a good idea. Well, to be a really good idea. And then I bought more in a pre-public financing at 30 cents. And then it went public and it got as high as 6. And I unloaded all mine in the $5 to $6 area. So it was a really good pass. And then it collapsed from there back down to pennies. I don't know, at one point. And then it went up again. And where is it now?
I haven't seen it. I haven't been following it in a while, but I mean, their timing was just so good because it kind of lined up with the last crypto bull market, as a publicly traded crypto miner. And so the timing was just so good for them
perfect. Yeah. But so anyway, they were one of the first, if not the first, crypto miners, but there are probably a dozen public crypto miners out there. I don't know. Nick Giambruno keeps close tabs on them, and he's recommending them highly. And they're probably all pretty cheap. And if you believe in Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever it is they're mining, they're probably really good buys right now.
Yeah, Hive right now, it's trading at $1.77.
It's pretty good. So I don't know, got to check its earnings and so forth, but there are other crypto miners that may be better bargains at the time, but so anyway, this is a reason why it's good to know people in various businesses and also be in a position where they want you in the deal. And they wanted me in the deal because I was well known. And if I liked the company, I'd tell other people about it. I mean, because you got to finance the business, but on the other hand, it can be a great stock promotion too. So this is one that's had a happy ending.
Okay. Let's see, like Doug's opinion on moving to Panama, are there some things that stand out on why not to move there?
Why not to move there? Well, look, I'm a fan of Panama because it's the most advanced of these Central American countries. It really is. It's got the canal, which is a big source of income for the country. So, that makes, raping and pillaging the population less urgent for the people in government because they've got the income from the canal. It's pretty big. Got a big tax haven industry element to them. It's got an Atlantic coast, a Pacific coast. They're both nice, both different, like them both. It's got mountains, which is great. It's a great little country. It's got lots of Americans, and the Americans, of course, who owned it more or less for what, 100 years. You know, a lot of people speak English there, which is convenient for Americans. Panama City is very advanced. It has, you know, it's cosmopolitan. So yeah, I'm a fan of Panama. I mean, would you agree, or do you see some?
No, I agree with all that. The only thing, the only reason I could say not to, there's two reasons that I'd say not to. And I'm not saying you shouldn't. I'm just saying these are two counterpoints to consider. Number one is that they handled the COVID lockdowns incredibly poorly. It was one of the most locked down places in the world. Panama City was in particular. And, you know, it's not like, especially if you're in Panama City, it's not like a country where they don't have the ability to enforce that. They have lots of police all over the place who, you know, actually made sure that those regulations were enforced. And they were really, really heavy handed. Like you couldn't, I had friends who were living there at the time when the lockdown started, and, you know, they got to leave the house for a few hours a week on a certain day based upon what the last digits of their passport. That's what determined who could be out during certain days. So my friend could never leave without her husband or with her husband. Like they were trapped inside, and then one of them could go out for 3 hours on one day of the week and another for 3 hours on another day of the week. So they handled that extremely poorly, and they kept the restrictions, even the mask restrictions, on for a long, long time. And so I didn't like that. And the other thing is that the last time I was there, and I always liked going to Panama. I mean, I always enjoyed going to Panama. I thought it was all the good things you mentioned. I totally agree. But the last time I was there, I noticed a underlying tension between myself and the Panamanians I encountered. Not the Panamanians that, you know, were like the you know, the upper class, not the elite class, right? But the ones who were taking care of us, you know, whether it be in the hotel or in the taxi or anywhere else. And there was almost like a resentment that I had never experienced before. I found Panamanians always be very friendly and open, but there was an edge there that didn't exist before. And I just think that after 2 years of serious lockdowns there, that the economic hardship has grown, and that has created stresses in the system. And, you know, when I see that kind of like that stress, it always worries me when I'm an obvious outsider. So there's that.
That's a good point.
But that may have dissipated since last I was there. I mean, honestly, I haven't been there since, I don't know, maybe 8 months or so. So it might have gone away.
Yeah. And of course, Panama is a special case because of the canal and the Americans having been there in the canal zone, which kind of divides the country in two for decades and decades. But it's still Central America. It's still the land of the Frito Bandito, if you were, with a lot of the problems of Central America. So that, look, they used to have a guy that ran the place back in the 70s and 80s, I guess, Omar Torrijos, who kind of liked to fashion himself as a Fidel Castro lookalike. And he was kind of lucky that the Americans didn't send the 82nd Airborne in there, as they did for, who was that guy that they actually, Noriega. Right. So maybe it's not the most stable place in the world.
People even forget about that with Noriega, because that was in the 80s, right?
When did they come in? And when the Americans came in there, I hate to say we, but the U.S. government and the U.S. military, we still don't know today how many Panamanians got killed.
No, but they had naval ships shelling the old town. I mean, you can still, it was amazing.
No, it was crazy. That movie, The Tailor of Panama. Worth seeing, about John le Carre. Now, I saw that, and I'd like to see it again. It's kind of built around an invasion by the U.S. of a little Central American country, which is obviously Panama. So it's kind of like a U.S. puppet in a way that gets out of control from time to time when somebody like Torrijos or Noriega gets in there and gets a little bit too uppity. I don't know.
But there are a lot of people a lot of expats live there and have a high quality of life and they like it. I mean, we have
And love it for good reasons. So you got to go down there and hang out yourself. That's always the answer to these things. And do it now while it's still possible, because I got a feeling that before this decade is over, the whole world's going to be locked down and traveling is not going to be easy, either domestically or internationally for that matter. Certainly not internationally.
Yep, totally agree. Okay. Next question here. Let's see. How does Doug go about networking, arranging to meet prominent people, such as heads of state when he arrives in a new country?
It's kind of funny. A lot, just like those previous two questions, they tie into this.
Yeah.
I mean, if you go to a place and you are not known for anything, you have no outstanding skills or outstanding reputation, or you're not well known for any reason, well, I'd say your chances of meeting the top guy are slim and none, and Slim's out of town. But so you've got to qualify yourself, to be honest with you. So in my case, the skids have always been greased by the fact that I was well known within a certain area and had definite skills. And I had written a couple of books, which are great calling cards, much better than just anybody can have a business card. Not everybody can have a book, certainly not a book that is, well known. And what would I do? Well, I've said this before, and it still works. Assuming that you have the presence and the background to pull this off, I would interview lawyers, and some of us would get along and be friendly, and then you get invited to parties, because lawyers are power centers everywhere, and real estate brokers, same thing, centers of power and money. And I'm very interested in art, so I'd go to art galleries. Oh, but who goes to art galleries? Rich people. So if I had rapport with that was another entree. And polo, could always go to the local polo club and meet the same kind of people. And then they find out who you are. Oh, come home, we're having a party tonight. And so that's how you do it. And then you work your way up. Now, if you want to meet the top guy, you go, what's going to make it worth his while? There's lots of interesting foreigners that wander in and out of these crazy places. So I always had, my scheme, which was worked out. And I think I've explained how that started, where I, basically, look, I think I can make you internationally famous in a good light, not as a criminal, legitimately wealthy. You don't have to steal the money like Mobutu and all these other people did, and loved by the people, instead of worrying about who's going to, conduct a coup and shoot you in the back of the head. So I said, yeah, okay, I'll talk to you. Tell me more.
Yep.
And then it was a question. So that's how you do it. But you got to qualify yourself. And then you got to get on a plane and do it. But you got to qualify yourself first.
The only way you ever meet high status people, though, is by introduction. Someone introduces you to them.
Yes, right? That's right. I would say that's basically right. If that
it could be a lawyer doing it.
6 degrees of separation thing. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, take advantage of the 6 degrees of separation.
It's not like you're like sending direct mail to world leaders, or it's not like you're knocking on their door. No,
it doesn't work. Doesn't work. But
so you meet them by invitation.
By invitation. So it helps to know a lot of people.
Yep.
Who can introduce you, and then you follow it up.
Yep. And also just like the fact that you made it so public, this pitch that you've talked about here on the podcast a few times, when you speak publicly, you bring this up occasionally. And so there were a lot of people, hundreds or thousands of well-connected people who had heard you make this pitch. And then when one of them sort of encountered a circle of people where, hey, these people could benefit if they would execute on this pitch, they would make the connection.
Exactly right. That's exactly right. So, yeah.
Reputation, introductions, and having a pitch or having some value to bring to the table.
Necessary ingredients.
Okay, good. Doug, how do you feel about Harry Dent?
I've met him, but we didn't even sit down and have a cup of coffee together. I don't know if I don't think the two of us had any immediate rapport with each other at a very small conference. We certainly could have spent time if we'd wanted to. What's his thing? Is it demographics? Is that his thing?
Fundamentally, he's a deflationist based upon demographics.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. But I think there's more to investing and speculating than that. I know that's what he's famous for. What's he feel at the moment? And
day to day, I don't know because it changes all the time. But I think he tries to apply, of course, that fundamental thesis for the last, as far as I know, 20 years that I've noticed him. It's the same thing. He applies that to whatever's happening, that template. And I think the idea of the demographics as a key component to understanding like GDP growth and makes a lot of sense. I mean, it does
makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I agree.
But I've seen him predict in the last couple of years during especially during the COVID era, like huge crashing of stock market and gold and everything else, to match his thesis. And so far that hasn't happened.
Yeah. So I wish I'd gotten to know him just because I'd have an insight in how his mind works and how he thinks from a personal basis, as opposed to expounding in a speech or something like that. So I don't know.
It's kind of tough when you're like it seems to me when you're a guru, as he is. I'd say people would consider him a guru, a financial guru. Maybe he considers himself that, who becomes very, very well known for a certain frame of thinking. Like I don't know if his long-term adherence to that basic frame of thinking is because he is not open to outside information, or because it would just be so off-brand of him to switch it up. So I wonder about his intellectual dexterity, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know what his actual philosophical beliefs are, how he actually thinks the world outside of deflation and demographics and that stuff works. So got to get to know the guy personally so you can figure these things out a little bit better and see if he's, building these things upon a psychological aberration down there somehow that sometimes gets it right. I don't know. I wish I'd gotten to know the guy when I had a chance.
Yeah, the only thing, and it doesn't show up in my feed very often anymore on YouTube, but like he does this Harry's rant thing, I think every Friday or something. And it's like a 5-minute him, fire hose ranting on, the markets and his predictions.
Does it? Well, that's interesting. It's called
Harry's rant.
Oh,
yeah.
I'm not a big fan of rants. On the other hand, sometimes things that are called rants are just spirited presentations of a point of view. Right. A rant has a connotation of being irrational and somewhat unhinged.
Unhinged, yes. Unhinged is tied into it, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's the ones I've seen. There's a bit of that sometimes in there.
All right. Send me one so I can see one.
I will. I'll look what up. Okay, so let's talk about somebody who's a question. Actually, next question is this one. Says he wants me to ask you your opinion on something. This is a 19-year-old who says he's currently in college but not sure if it's for him. What are Doug's thoughts on dropping out and pursuing something like sales instead?
Yeah, great question. Relating to that Renaissance Man book, which you and I have talked about for years, of course, and few people have presented themselves as potential co-authors, which I need because I'm just have too many things to do and I'm too lazy, but it would be a worthwhile undertaking. That book would answer this question, I think,
Perfect for him
properly.
if we had.
Yeah. So, okay, here you are, you're 19, you're in college. What kind of college? Are you in Harvard, Yale, or in Princeton, or in some dog shit
State school.
junior college? Well, at least if you're in one of these really ritzy places, that might be worth staying in, even though it'll be a corrupting influence and expensive and largely a waste of time, still benefits. But the trouble with being 19 is that, and even going out to be a salesman, which is a great idea, is that I'm not sure at 19 you have enough experience, have bounced off enough hard objects yet to be able to do it. What would I do if I was 19? First of all, it's got to be costing you money to be in college. So, like I said, unless you're in a unique position, maybe a scholarship, I don't know, who knows? But I would get the hell out of the college. It's a corrupting influence. It's going to erode all kinds of good things that you probably have going. So I'd quit that. And if you have the money, I would take the opportunity while it still exists to kind of backpack around the world and meet as many people as you can, stay in student hostels, camp out, it depends on how much money you have, and try to see the whole world for a couple, 3 years. Now, you've got some really unique and worthwhile and interesting experiences that automatically are going to put you in the top 1% of things. And all the while, of course, you're reading books constantly and educating yourself theoretically in addition to practically. So doing that. So I do that. Nothing wrong with joining the Army or Marine Corps for a couple of years. I mean, it depends.
There's certain times, yes.
Yeah, maybe it depends on this and that and the other thing. But trouble with being 19 is you've got to take advantage of this time. And sitting in a college classroom and then going out and drinking beer and chasing girls, it's not the best way to do it. You've got to be more proactive, okay?
Even like
going to college.
Yeah, and even taking a job, like a sales job could potentially be wonderful for someone at 19, but it could also just be, most sales jobs aren't actual sales anyway. You're actually kind of an order taker or
taking, yeah.
And it's not, and those you don't learn anything, and it's not, and you're basically static as well. And I think those are really like dangerous and can lock you into like a certain income expectation and expense status or whatever. So it could be really risky. I think that the most opportunities will emerge if you're on the move.
If you're on the move, exactly. And while you're on the move, having sales skills is really important. Like, everybody's probably seen that movie, The Wolf of Wall Street, with Leonardo DiCaprio. And in that, there's one scene I thought was very good, where his character takes a pen. This is an old thing. This is nothing new with that movie. Puts it in front of a guy. He's trying to size the guy up. He says, "Sell me this pen." Okay. And most people are flummoxed. So, gee, I don't know how or whatever. And actually, that is an extremely shrewd and important thing. Sell me this pen. How are you going to sell that pen? Are you going to sell it because it's cheap? Or are you going to sell it because it's finely made? Or the way I would go about selling it is asking the person, what do you think is the most important single thing you can own? And well, let me give you a suggestion. And you can say thoughts and how you can use the pen, and maybe as a close at the end. And incidentally, you're probably thinking about this. this is an extremely high quality pen and the price is right. And then you ask for the order.
Yes, of course.
You ask for the order. You're not there to give the guy a lecture. You're there to get the money. So yeah. But being a salesman, there's no, you've got to sell high ticket items where there's money in it.
Yeah.
There's
And
no
usually
money in selling a single pen, probably.
That's right. And you got to be more skilled and more experienced to be able to sell those highly technical products. So it's hard to kind of get in the door and do that at 19 also, so I think that's another challenge.
Yeah, but if you come back at 22 and you've been around the world and you got lots of experiences, got a better idea of whatever's important to that guy, you got a better chance of relating to it and establishing rapport with them and giving the customer what he wants.
Right.
Because you know something,
Right.
which you don't if you haven't been around the block.
That's right. And I mean, you walk into the room with a different presence in everything you do if you've got some experience under your belt. And that's the biggest thing you need to get when you're a young man, I think. For
exactly.
Sure.
Yeah, exactly. You won't be intimidated. And if you're not intimidated, the guy will pick that up. And that'll work way to your favor. Yep.
And I think we could go out and talk about this at another time, but I think there's a good way and a suboptimal way to do, the international travel kind of thing, where one way you kind of stay with your peer group only. You never really, you get the benefits of like the dollar arbitrage in your cheap countries. And, so you can live a lifestyle that's higher than you would be able to live in the US with very little income, but you basically hang around with your peer group the whole time, other travelers like yourself and so forth. Or there's one where you are using the fact that you're coming in from the outside, that you're automatically locally considered of, in some places, higher status. And so you use that essentially to get experiences and opportunities with a totally different group of people, and not your peer group. And I think that, it's more complicated, but I think that's, I've seen some digital nomads who basically, they can go through a year or two of traveling all over the world, but and having the same essentially friend group that they made in Chiang Mai, they're meeting up in Bogota or something, it's the same kind of group of friends who end up traveling around separately, but end up in the same hostels or Airbnbs, but they never get out of that cycle and they never know locals. They never make, connections of super high status people. I mean, if you're you can think this is bad, but if you're a white person and, South America is a lot more racist than North America is, people are shocked by that, but it's true. If you're a white American and you come to South America, you'll be considered higher status by the virtue of being white, so then you can get into these inner circles more easily. And anyway.
Yeah. And that's certainly, and that's true all over the world, frankly, certainly in Africa.
So there's a right way and a wrong way, but biggest thing, I think, getting experience. So I was 19 years old. And honestly, I just remember at 19, Doug, I was just chomping at the bit to do something. I imagine you were the same. You just wanted to like go somewhere, do something. I was in the Army then. So, I had no more control over what I was doing, but there's a chomping at the bit, especially for young men, I think at that 17, they need to go. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I feel, so stupid having gone to college myself. And when I went to college, it was kind of a privilege, and not that many people did it relative to the way it is now, but I shouldn't have done it. But you got a great education and you went
good counsel.
You got a great education and you went to an elite school. So that didn't hurt you.
Yeah, but did I get an education? What did I learn? I mean, just hung out with a bunch of, other kids that none of us knew what we were doing.
But you probably read things you wouldn't have read,
Probably. What I needed was to think about these things instead of just going off and doing them, because from the high school I went to a military boarding high school, and everybody went to college. That's just what you did. It's like going from grade school to high school. Yeah, you just do that. But that's a stupid way to run your life.
That's true. That's what everyone does. They're just kind of as an autopilot, which I think
Yeah.
is a good question. Okay. All right. Next question. He says, great comments from Doug on commodity trading, especially the butter and egg man conversation we had last time. He asked if you've read The Tao of Capital by Mark Spitznagel.
I haven't even heard of it. Perhaps sad to say.
It's a
So
good
I
book.
guess
I read it, but it came out maybe 8 years ago. I'm guessing something like that. I know.
What do you
I
think
read it.
about it?
I thought it was very good. I thought it was he had a very interesting way of, he had a Taoist way of thinking about money management and capital. Oh, and I don't think I would do it justice trying to summarize it, but I think you'd enjoy it. I think you'd enjoy it. And I've got a copy down here. So when you get down here, I'll let you borrow mine if you
Oh,
like.
that's fantastic. That's fantastic because have you installed this huge library yet or not? I
Oh,
forget.
no. I'm still trying to figure out, I'm still trying to get it past customs.
Of course. The Uruguayan government doesn't really want to keep the people ignorant and barefoot, but they're so stupid that they'll wind up doing that.
The problem is I can import books, no problem, but I have all the bookshelves too. So it's furniture. So how do I do that? And then there's some card catalogs, and what are those called? So we'll get past it, but.
Okay, but that's good to know. Okay, that's great. Okay, I'll pick that up when I see you, and of course I'll be down there in 4 days or something like that.
Yeah, looking forward to having you here. Yeah. Okay, let's see. Next question here is, Doug, what's your opinion on offshore jurisdictions like Cayman, BVI, et cetera, and their utility for folks who live onshore? He says this has to break down the negative connotations presented by Hollywood. I assume he's talking about Americans.
Yeah. Well, these places are famous for being private banking centers and private corporation centers where you can, have assets that nobody really knows who owns them and things like that. And in today's world, mainly because of the US government and international organizations that it belongs to, they're closing the net, and it's very, very hard and inconvenient to use these places now. It's not like it used to be. Swiss banking secrecy is a dead duck, for instance. Forget about that. Well, forget about Swiss banking if you're an American. If you're an American, you can't open an account in Switzerland unless you're minimum 7 figures.
Yeah.
So what about those places? And of course, what recently happened with Vanuatu, I guess they've the European Union has killed visa-free travel for Vanuatu people because it's a tax haven that sells citizenships. So these places are under attack by the powers that be all over the world. So
for Americans in particular, all of the only legal benefits, the utility he asks about, the utility as I understand it, and I'm sure it's probably become worse since last time I looked into it, is basically twofold. Number one is if you have a truly international business that is legitimately outside of the United States, and it is domiciled in, maybe one of these tax haven countries, it's domiciled there and it operates internationally, but not in the United States, then you could retain the earnings for that business and essentially defer taxes on them. So, but as soon as you take them, you have to pay taxes. So there's no way to not pay taxes.
yes, there are all kinds of tax rules as to who owns the corporation and is it 50% or more than 5%, and different rules that hoops you have to jump through.
And even things like if you have a foreign bank account with more than $10,000 in it and you fail to report it, then you could lose all of the balance of those accounts. I mean,
and if they don't like you, they'll prosecute you criminally with jail time if they don't like you for some reason. So if I had a business that was certainly internet related, I would seriously consider living in one of those places. and you want to stay legal in this world because the fickle finger of fate points at you, they can make you very, very uncomfortable. But, the best thing is not to be a US citizen anymore. It's just way, way too much trouble and risk than it's worth. And what do you get for it? Other than being the first guy executed if the wrong people hijack your plane. You get that. That's a bonus. So, yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for those places, but it's getting tougher.
Yep. Okay. Doug, what's your take on U.S. Treasuries, especially if they hit 6 to 7% next year? I think it means what's your take on what would happen if U.S. Treasuries hit 6 to 7% next year?
I think there's going to be a lot of bankruptcies. People that have to refinance their outstanding debt have to refinance. But if they can refinance it at all, because money would be tight at that point, would have to do so at interest levels that maybe they can't handle, especially if the economy gets bad and income goes down. So, but, the US government is, or the Fed, I should say, is they're on a tightrope above the Grand Canyon. They tighten too much, could fall into catastrophic deflation because there's all this debt. And if they print too much so the debt can be financed, well, then inflation goes so high that it destroys. There's no way out for these people. They actually are finally painted themselves into a corner. And I'm sure that they're thinking of the central bank digital currencies as another way of kicking the can a little further down the road at the expense of the average guy, of course. But I don't know. It's out of control because nobody with any sense is going to lend money at 2% or 5 or 8% or whatever it is. If inflation is running 10%, which it is, and could go to 20%, who's going to lend money like that? That's like a guaranteed loss.
Right. Well, the only reason they've done it so far is because that money's been free.
It's been free.
Yeah.
Exactly. So free money, hey, it's free money. You do all kinds of stupid things that you would not do if it wasn't free money. Yeah. So I'm still betting on a genuine financial catastrophe. It's not just, are we going to have a recession? This is a
that's the debate. Yeah.
Question. It's the wrong question. The real question is, how bad is the depression going to be? And how long will it last? Not, are we going to have a recession? They're asking the wrong question. So if you ask the wrong question, of course, you're going to get the wrong answer.
Good. Okay. Doug, what's your favorite tequila?
Well, I've tried tequila any number of times. I am not a tequila fan, even good tequila. The taste of it just doesn't appeal to me, which is too bad because I feel like I should like.
I feel like if I could get, I like this one called Casa Dragones, and I was not a fan of tequila either. And then a friend of mine, had me try this, and it was totally different. It's a sipping tequila.
Right. You have some of that at the house in Uruguay?
I wish. You can't. I mean, it's so hard to get good tequila here in Uruguay. It's unbelievable. I don't know.
That's one of the problems with Uruguay, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe I'll.
What's the name of it? When I go through customs, perhaps I can pick up.
They won't have it there. They won't have it there.
I
looked. No. Yeah. But I'll try and get a bottle down here so you can try it, because you might change your mind a little bit if you have some.
Yeah, but as it stands, my favorite is I like tequila if it's in a margarita. Which,
of course.
That sugar and lime juice and all that stuff civilizes the tequila from my point of view. Yeah. I'm a bourbon drinker, and scotch, I like scotch, and I also like martinis, which vodka martinis mostly. But I don't drink a lot to start with, so.
Okay. This is this is a kind of an odd question, Doug, but it says, Doug's, what's your opinion of the simp economy of OnlyFans? Can it be lucrative yet a moral endeavor to get beautiful, willing women from Argentina, Uruguay, South Brazil to do OnlyFans to acquire Western money? Somebody else would be typing in English to make it seem as if they were American women. This money would help their family's economic situation and is seemingly more profitable than trying to do anything useful in the fake economy we have now.
Well, as I understand it, and I only understand this secondhand.
Yes, and I only understand I understand from articles I've read, so I can't say I've delved into this personally. But I gave Doug a 1-minute tutorial on OnlyFans before we started, just for the record.
Yeah, and I guess as we were chatting about, it's that anything that's voluntary between two willing adults is fine, but I hate to take advantage of people because maybe the guys that are paying for this, maybe it's like buying a copy of Playboy magazine, which is one thing. They know they're not going to establish a relationship with the playmate of the month, but maybe these things, they think they can establish a relationship with these women. And maybe the women want to reach out to you too. Russian girls want to meet you. Those ads.
Yeah, this is not a new idea, right? This has been around forever.
Not a new idea. Well, I don't have any moral problems with it other than it's kind of catering to the baser instincts of, it's not like forming a book club and, people get to know each other on that basis. They're getting to know each other on kind of the lowest common denominator. And maybe you're exploiting them, but it's, I'd say do it if you want to. There's nothing wrong with it.
I think the anything wrong with it would be in the how you do it, from a moral standpoint. Like the way you choose to conduct yourself in your business would really put the guardrails on if you cross any ethical line. But I think, certainly it should be, this kind of thing should be legal. Like we talked about that. We totally agree. Of course, there shouldn't be anybody telling you can't do this, but you have certain amounts of creative energy and, that and capital, and where you pour that, you got to be very careful. I think one of the things that I would say very, very, very careful, because, certainly you could have, this is not something that in certain company people would look very badly at it. So it could definitely, it goes in your reputation to some degree that you're doing this. And you end up being around, I owned a bar. I owned an Irish pub when I had an internet ad business a long time ago, and I made all my money in the internet ad business, but I bought the bar for fun and my brother ran it, and it kind of was fun sometimes. But the people that you associate with there were not, most of them were not good people. The people who hung around that environment, it was not good. It was like, and while it might be fun, I don't know. I guess there's a certain, I don't know. You kind of burden yourself with a lower standard of humanity, I guess, if you're catering to the sin businesses.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's like, I enjoy playing poker sometimes, but I've got to admit that most of the people, certainly in a casino, I'm not talking about a friendly Monday night game with your buddies. They're basically degenerates. They're not people that you want to associate with other places. Life's too short to associate with sleazy people. And that business, you're going to be catering to the wrong side of humanity.
Yeah, no doubt about it. No doubt about it. Okay. So let's see. And I think that question came up because this guy who's become lots of fame recently is this guy named Andrew Tate. And he is this, known as this internet alpha male guy. And he started a webcam business in Romania and became a multimillionaire doing that. So I think that's why this idea is so in the zeitgeist right now. I don't know, but.
Yeah, maybe you can find a kind of a tangent to that business that will be very profitable, but won't have the unfortunate connotations, which It has.
Okay. Next question. Doug stated that the average S&P stock will drop massively in price during the coming big crash. I understand the concept of having good positions in gold and silver and mining companies. But what does Doug classify as a bad S&P stock? I assume stocks like Tesla and the FANGs will be hit the worst, but what about consumer staples? He talks about Altria, pays an 8% dividend, et cetera, et cetera. He says, are these stocks like the average S&P stocks you speak of, or is there another class you can describe?
Well, look, there's 500 stocks in the S&P. They're basically the biggest companies in the country, and they're in every business, and they're divided into different sections, the consumer staples and raw materials, all this stuff. So what do I think will be bad? I think discretionary purchase stocks are going to be bad. Companies that sell things that people actually don't need, because when times get tough, people cut back, and that's going to hurt those corporations that are doing that. This is a whole huge discussion. What kind of stocks you want to own? Like Altria, okay, cigarettes. But do you know, I just found this out the other day, New Zealand is passing a law or contemplating a law.
I think it passed.
It passed. So now, what was it?
If you're born after 2008, they cannot legally ever sell you cigarettes in the country.
Yes, and if you do, or what happens to you? Bad things happen to you.
I didn't read the penalties. I didn't see that.
Penalties, as I recall, were quite onerous. That you better not have cigarettes within the reach of somebody born after that date. So it's like they're trying to put on a prohibition against tobacco, much the way the U.S. idiotically prohibited alcohol from 1919 to 1933 or something like that. It's idiotic. It's it's immoral. I mean, it's uneconomic. It's everything. But the Kiwis are doing that. So how's that going to affect Altria, which peddles cigarettes? Okay, maybe other countries are going to do that. Probably.
That's a good point.
Puritanical. All these countries are nationalizing, the health system. You don't want people smoking because it might drive up health costs, all kinds of bullshit reasons.
Right. It's socially irresponsible now because you're putting the costs on your neighbor.
Yeah, exactly. And what are you going to do with the filter tip on the end of your cigarette? I mean, that's destroying Mother Earth. There's all kinds of reasons that they'll come up with. So maybe Altria is not such a safe thing after all. I mean, this is really complicated stuff. I just don't want any part of the stock market in general for all kinds of reasons, which we can't go into now.
It says, I'm just looking at the penalties here. It says, New York Times article, it says by the end of next year, 90% of the country's 6,000 tobacco retailers will have lost their licenses. Nicotine levels in tobacco and vaping products must be significantly reduced under the new laws, rendering them less addictive, and violators of the new rules could be fined up to 150,000 New Zealand dollars, which is about 96,000 US.
Yeah. Well, first of all, why do you have to have a license to sell tobacco? That's the first question that nobody asks. I mean,
why does there have to be a body that exists that even makes licenses available?
Yeah. Then the next thing is, what are they going to do with older pictures, which seem to make smoking romantic, like every picture that Humphrey Bogart's ever been in, like Casablanca? What are you going to excise those parts of the movie? Because kids might think, gee, that's kind of cool. I want to do that. Listen, this leads down a really dark and nasty rabbit hole.
Right. It's funny how the right is associated with being sort of puritanical, like really controlling of social behaviors.
Yeah.
But the left has kind of gone full circle now, and I could imagine them actually editing movies to remove those smoking scenes, become so puritanical about it that we just can't even expose people to this act that is just so, abhorrent.
Yeah, this is why I hate the right and the left almost equally. In fact, at this point, the right are such limp dicks that, are going along with everything the left has, except, hey, you're going too far, you're going too fast. They basically are saying. So they don't even have it's disgusting. It's terrible being part of the 2% of humanity that are actually anarcho-oriented libertarians. I mean,
Yeah.
we're in a dangerous position because both the right and the left are going to dislike and hate us.
No doubt about that. One of the things about, just real quick on this S&P stock question, is that the most risky companies or stocks, you'd think would be these, well, I guess they're labeled zombie companies, right? That basically have only even allowed to maintain their existence because of debt, and that they don't have any earnings, and yet they've still been functioning and they're traded on the public markets. And there's a lot of them. I mean, I think I'm sure I could look it up, but I think that there's certainly hundreds of publicly traded companies in the US that are zombie companies.
Yeah, lots of debt, not much revenue, if any revenue, and big expenses. They gotta go to zero. Great short sales for the long run, no question.
Okay. All right. Last question, Doug. Can you offer a few book recommendations that haven't been or that have been the most influential for you personally? Maybe 3 specifically that you might recommend that people should take a look at for a thought-provoking read.
I think that's pretty easy for me. I would say Ayn Rand's book, The Virtue of Selfishness, I think is actually breathtakingly, shockingly good. So that's one. Kind of philosophical, but really a good read because it's so shocking. And another would be for economics. The best simple economics book ever written, I think, is Economics in One Lesson by Henry Hazlitt. That would be a second one that you must read. And a third one, my personal favorite, is The Market for Liberty by Morris and Linda Tannehill, which explains how the world would work without government. Different subject than these other 2 books. So those are 3 books that I think are kind of foundational. I mean, I could name lots of science fiction books, which I love, and history and all kinds of stuff. But I basically come back to those 3. And all 3 of them are short. They're short and easy reading.
Yep. Great.
Do you have any
choices?
Anything you particularly like? Or
I don't think there's anything better than those 3 as like foundational for shocking your thinking about stuff. I think that like even when the last time I reread Ayn Rand's The Virtue of Selfishness a couple of years ago, and like the idea of selfish, I don't like that word. And I remember thinking, gosh, if you just use a different word for this, it's like,
should have used a different word, right?
Yeah, because I naturally have this rejection where I want to like go, but like selfishness. I have that word is so associated with bad things in my head. Also, part in a way, kind of her brilliance in doing is taking the word that has baggage and arguing for that still, and like I think that there's some genius in her doing it that way, not softening it by using an easier word.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, you can't let the bad guys, the altruists, if you would, capture the language, which they are doing today. So one of the nice things about Rand is, if she treated the average person the way a mule skinner would treat a donkey, well, what do? Well, why would you hit the mule between the eyes with a 2x4? And the answer is, well, you got to get his attention.
Yep.
And so she does that by using a word like selfishness. So yeah, it's true.
Yeah. And that's actually a really good book, especially in light of this SBF stuff, because he was part of the effective altruism movement, right? All his virtues of being altruistic, and look where that leads.
Oh God, what a horror! What a substandard human being. About the only good. it's funny. He hyphenated his last name, which as far as I'm concerned is a tip off to a person that's saying he's a narcissist. Look at me, look at me. I'll hyphenate my last name because my parents are so special and I'm special. But that's one thing that should have been a tip off about him, other than the total bullshit he was spouting about how he's going to give away his money to charity, which is generally corrupting and bad.
I only want to get super rich so I can give it away. That's all. I have a Toyota Corolla. That's what I drive. I just, just that. Now, don't look at my $40 million penthouse apartment and forget about that. I just look like Toyota Corolla.
Yeah, this is a person with serious psychological problems. But I'm looking for a good thing about him. And his name, Samuel Bankman-Fried, is easily converted to sham bankrupt fraud, which is hopefully how SBF will be remembered.
Oh, I can't imagine it going another way. It'd be hard to imagine. But yeah, he's gonna, I would love to just I would love to see like a webcam of his cell, just like a little like a 5-minute view of him and how his life is right now, because he must just be just total shock for this pampered, privileged, soft boy.
Did I hear that he's sharing it with 5 Bahamian criminals?
My understanding is the only cells they have there outside of maximum security are multi, or 6-person cells or larger.
Yeah. Well, if you think that because he gave all this money to the Democrats and God knows that he'd skate, but as we talked about the last time, I'll lay money that, he's a dead man walking.
Yep. Yeah, I think, and I mean, in the very least, he's definitely stuck in that Bahamian prison until I thought it was March or February, but apparently there's a hearing in it was March, and I think there's a hearing now in February. We're trying to get bail again, but it's hard to, no matter what, he will not be the same person by the time, if he leaves that Bahamian prison, he will not be the same person as he was going into it.
That's right. And well, is he going to leave the Bahamian prison?
I doubt it. That's 50-50, I think.
Kind of doubt that. But the good news is that I listened to an interview with Mr. Wonderful.
Yeah.
What's that show?
Well, either on CNBC or on when I was on Stansbury.
Yeah, with Danielle Cambone.
Yeah.
And it's amazing, but what's Mr. Wonderful's full name?
I can't remember.
Yeah, I can't remember. But I guess he's kind of loyal to Sham because they were friendly and he was supporting him and blah blah blah. I admire loyalty. I do, but
this is purchased loyalty, Doug. He gave Mr. Wonderful $15 million.
Yeah, actually, Mr. Wonderful should be actively more pissed off than most people because he was taken in and swindled. So it's misplaced loyalty on Mr. Wonderful's part.
I think so. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it totally undermined his credibility completely. Like, anything he says ever again about anything, I'm just going to consider he's part of a giant grift. Like, he has no credibility in my mind at all.
Yeah, and exactly. And, the thing is, he's got too much money it's really rather stupid to even consider a grift. The whole thing is just, but one thing that was nice that he said is there will be a thorough financial audit of this. It'll be torn apart and we'll find out where all the money goes. Well, maybe it will and maybe it won't because of where the money goes. I wouldn't be so sure about that, but I hope it is, because then we'll find out where all that money went to the Ukraine and the politics, and hopefully it'll be clawed back. So the Zelensky regime will have to give it back, and all the politicians will have to give it back. But wait, they can't because they've already pissed it away. So this is going to be really interesting. I think they're going to probably just under the rug and
And I mean, most of the money that's given out politically goes through PACs. That PAC will go bankrupt. You'll never know exactly, they'll just shut down the PAC, basically wind it down.
Yeah,
And so they'd have to follow the money trail multiple levels through, which won't happen.
no, it won't happen.
And
No.
it's not like Zelensky is going to comply with a U.S. bankruptcy judge. I mean, come on, or it's
No.
just never going to happen. I mean,
Of course not. Why should the dictator of a shithole country on the other side of the world do what he's told?
exactly. So anyway, I don't expect any justice there, but there is some satisfaction in seeing this effective altruist, knowing that he's sitting in hell, in a version of hell for him right now, for sure.
Yes.
I think Mr. Wonderful deserves to be there too, though. I have to say.
I've got to say, I'm very disappointed in Mr. Wonderful. Very disappointed.
It's terrible.
Yeah, it is.
All right. Well, we'll leave it there, Doug. I think we'll probably have next week off as you are traveling here to Uruguay, but we'll be back the following week.
Or we might catch up on Friday if anybody has some interesting questions. Or
if you're available and ready for it, we'll do it on Friday. But I just don't want to guarantee it because I want to. So
probably plan on that, and maybe something really wild and woolly and wonderful will happen in the world in the next week too.
It's quite possible. Thanks for having us. All right. Thanks, Doug. Have a good weekend.
Thanks, Matt. You too.